Hi, everyone. We're here today with MonTech, and we are going to be presenting on accessibility and inclusion in online meetings. I'm Maddie Kelly, and I am an AT ambassador with MonTech.
And I'm Michelle Allen, and I'm the AT specialist with MonTECH.
So many of you must be wondering, what is MonTech? MonTech is Montana's assistive technology program, and we're federally funded by the Administration for Community Living, which means we provide free loans of equipment and assistive technology, free one-on-one assistance to learn about assistive technology, and free team trainings. We're going to start off with introductions. There's obviously many ways to introduce yourself to a group, but here on the screen is a common example. It is important to let all attendees know your name and then the title or program that you're associated with, and usually a fun fact about yourself. For those who are visually impaired, it may be helpful to also include any relevant visual information about yourself so they get familiar with the attendees in the meeting. There's ground rules. Decide prior to a presentation how you'll address things such as the comments, questions, and the chat box. Every meeting is going to have a different dynamic, and ground rules are just an easy way to keep a meeting running smoothly. So for example, a couple of MonTech's general rules. Questions and comments are always welcome, but please unmute and state your program and name first. And then items in the chat will be shared aloud by Michelle. So throughout our various trainings on accessibility and online meetings, we began to ask the question, what makes you feel included during online meetings? And here are some of our responses. Good audio, repeating questions that may be asked, especially things that are put in the chat box. Getting slides in advance, any handouts or agendas for the meeting. Brief audio descriptions during introductions. Interpreters, especially introducing interpreters if they are going to be part of the meeting, a good quality camera, repeating what a soft-spoken person may have said, and then making sure that all surveys and evaluations are accessible. So there's a few easy ways presenters can be inclusive. One is to send slides, handouts, and/or the agenda in advance so everyone has a chance to look over them. Use a headset with a mic for better sound and overall clarity. And this is a big one, normalize distractions. So someone's screen reader is dinging every time someone enters the meeting. A chat is being read aloud by a screen reader. There may be a caregiver or child in the background. Just be vigilant and know that as a presenter, you are able to mute participants as needed, especially before there's a discussion and it becomes a whole ordeal. But for people with disabilities, it may be very difficult to mute and unmute on their own, so just be ready to do both. And then record presentations unless there's a compelling reason not to. So for example, MonTech hosts AAC town halls each month. These meetings are meant to be to help build a community of practice where professionals and caregivers can share certain strategies and learn from one another. The value of these meetings correlates directly with live presence and active participation. It's not necessarily meant to be a teaching tool that you can use at your own convenience, but rather a conversation. So to meet the mission of those AAC town halls, we choose not to record them. But generally speaking, it is better to record. It allows those with learning disabilities, attention deficit, etc., to review anything they may have missed. Or if a person using a screen reader muted chat, they can access the recorded chat or transcript and get that information if it wasn't read aloud in real time. More ways to be inclusive. Repeat questions, assign a partner to watch the captioning, and be specific when discussing slides because some people really are just relying on words. In most cases, most of us are working with auto-generated captions, which are notorious for making mistakes. So engaging help with monitoring those captions can help you address potential or possibility for misunderstandings quicker. It's important that the information is communicated accurately among participants. And so, to give you guys a little bit more of a personal perspective on the topic, we have asked two guests to share their stories with you today. They are both accomplished professionals, experienced not only in self advocacy, but in broader disability advocacy as well.
Thanks, Maddie. This is Michelle, and I'm going to present to you the two guest speakers. The first one is Sarah Streeter. She's on our advisory council, and she is an advocate for blind and low vision population. Sarah retired after a 34-year career in accounting and finance. She is an active volunteer and peer mentor for people experiencing vision loss.
Hello. My name is Sarah Streeter. I've been asked to talk to you about how the lack of accessibility in online meetings affects me. I'm visually impaired from a retinal condition that is degenerative and progressive. One of the things I can no longer do because of it is read, whether that's on a computer screen or the paper that comes into the house. Typically what I do instead is use a screen reader, piece of technology that's embedded in most computers and smartphones anymore. Pretty much what it sounds like. It just reads whatever happens to be on the screen. For online meetings, there are actually three things where accessibility or lack thereof really impacts me. I'll go to my first pet peeve. That's the text chat box. For people that can see normally, you basically have two channels of input, your eyes and your ears. And so your eyes can be taking in what's in the text chat box while your ears are taking in whatever the meeting participants are saying. For me, I have basically one input channel, my ears. And I have my screen reader running during the meeting, and it will be trying to read to me what's coming into the text chat box. However, typically that's happening at a little lower volume than the meeting participants are speaking. So usually I miss it. I can only attend to one audio input at a time, and it's going to be whoever is speaking during the meeting. So unless somebody goes back occasionally and recaps whatever has been coming into the text chat box, I won't typically get whatever information has been put in there. The next thing that I find really difficult or can find difficult is when something is put up on the screen through a screen share by a meeting participant, a PowerPoint presentation, a comic, a picture, a chart. Again, I need some sort of explanation generally to know what that is. Alternatively, if I've been sent materials in advance, I may have already been able to gather what's in there. But otherwise, if I'm going to understand what it is during the meeting, somebody's probably going to have to do some sort of a recap. The third place that I find really difficult is simply knowing who it is that's speaking at any given time. Again, my screen reader, when the focus shifts from person to person, will be telling me who the new speaker is. But again, it's often a little below the volume of whoever is talking, and so I probably won't know who it is. If it's a group that I've been part of for a while, a smaller group, I will learn to pick up voices, but that's not going to happen in a new group, or it'll certainly be more difficult in a much larger group. I belong to a blind and low vision support group, and one of the things we started doing years ago, and back when we still met in person, was announcing before we said anything who it was that was doing the speaking. And that just makes such a difference, especially in a room full of people who really can't see well. But even if you've got a meeting with a single person who can't see well, it makes such a difference to them. As you might gather from these various items, Online meetings can be very difficult for me. They can be discouraging, frustrating, humiliating at times. I want to be a contributing member. I want to be able to pull my weight. But if I don't get the information, for instance, if I'm given an assignment on a screen that my computer can't read to me, I'm not going to know that. And so I'm going to come back to a future meeting not properly prepared. It's difficult for me and it can hurt the group. I remember what it was like to be independent, to be able to manage my own affairs. And I know accessibility is not going to be the solution to everything. It's not going to give me back all of my self-sufficiency, but it will give me back some of my dignity. I won't always be having to ask for help, having to ask to have things read to me. I will be able to contribute and to be a valuable member of a group. Thank you.
So we appreciate Sarah doing that video for us. She did mention a screen reader a couple times, and screen readers are a way for somebody who is visually impaired to access the information on their screen. It reads aloud their screen. And so these are just like some key points about a screen reader, that it starts at the top and goes to the bottom. We need to make our materials as accessible as possible. So it mentions alt text, alternative text. That would be anything that has a picture. We need to put a description to it. And then that screen reader will read that alt text, and that visually impaired person that's using that will not miss the information that the screen reader, it won't skip over it. They'll know what that is. And you can get screen reader applications on most computers. If you want to try it yourself to see how your documents are read during a screen reader, we can help you with that. If you have a client that you think might need this or might benefit from this, you can contact MonTECH and we can teach you more about screen readers. So our next speaker is Isaac Baldry. Many individuals use augmentative and alternative communication. We also call that AAC. It is important to recognize that people who don't communicate verbally are at very high risk of being unheard or left out. Isaac Baldry is a strong disability advocate from Miles City. He speaks on the issue of using a speech-generated device during online meetings.
Hello, Shauna. Thank you for asking me about accessibility for AAC users in Zoom meetings. I decided a picture doesn't really show what I need to participate in a Zoom meeting. So I did a short recording in Zoom. Welcome to my virtual office. Just like everyone else, I am doing a lot of Zoom meetings. There are things other people can do to help me participate. First, for me, is that people send me information ahead of time. What did you want me to read? Or what will we be talking about? Will there be questions? If so, I need time to write my answers and then add them to my device. It is best if I have everything a week ahead at least. I need time to think about what I want to say, because it is hard for me to listen and think about what I want to type. I do not like to try and write in my AAC device to speak to the group in Zoom. I could if I need to, or if I feel it is really important, but then I am not listening. Sometimes this happens if people did not think to send me the questions they will use in a breakout room. Planning for me to participate helps. Some AAC users are good with typing. They just need everyone to wait while they create their message. I don't like that. I get nervous with everyone watching me. It is even harder to type. I may shut my camera off so that I can focus. For me, if I have to type during the meeting, I would like the group to come back to me when I am ready. I could raise my hand or turn my camera back on to let people know I am ready. It would be good to ask what works best for each person. Shauna can talk to you about getting comfortable with the quiet. This is also important. It is helpful to let me know when it is my turn to speak. I don't want to talk over someone, and once I start what I wanted to say, I can only mute to stop my device. Whoever is leading the meeting can call on me if we are taking turns, or I could raise my hand in Zoom to let them know I have a comment. In my AAC groups, some people like to share using their communication device, and some people like to type in the chat. It depends what works best for them. Give people options to participate. I could not use a screen reader for the chat in Zoom. It helps me if all the chat is read out loud, and when it is still a part of the conversation. Sometimes I might write in chat if it is a big group and I want my comment added. If it is read out loud, then I know it was seen. I am trying to do this video quick for Shauna. I better add these comments as buttons, then change my shirt for Zoom and record. I am sure Shauna has more to share with you. Thanks for listening.
So Isaac mentioned Shauna because the last presentation we did was Shauna and I presented, but it's still a very relevant video to what we're talking about, making sure that everybody is heard and being okay with the patients, with the quiet. And so here's just some things we can do to make sure AAC users feel included. And when we're talking about turn taking, it's making space in your meeting so all the attendees have the opportunity to speak if they wish to. Taking turns is extremely important when you have an AAC user because they might take more time to answer a question. And then that brings us to normalizing the wait time, creating this space for them to respond and allowing extra wait time when you ask for input or feedback. So people using AAC or eye gaze have the chance to unmute, raise their hand, or type. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have someone using eye gaze to communicate. They're not actually typing on the computer. So that takes much more time for them to find each individual letter, like you see on the left-hand side, to type out what they're trying to say. So we just need to be patient and allow them time to also communicate in our meeting. Sometimes they use pre-recorded responses and word prediction to speed up their process, but it's still going to be silent time while we're waiting for their response. So anytime we can give information ahead of time to our users, especially if we know we're going to have users that will need extra time or a communication device. So visual impairment, speakers, you know, when you're doing visual descriptions, we have to think about what are we going to say to describe ourselves. So for visual impairment and online inclusion, there is approximately 12 million people 40 years and older in the US who have vision impairment. We have to remember as well that low vision and blindness impact a person's employability. Many people with low vision will try to hide the level of their impairment because they're fearful of losing their jobs. This means your information and presentations should be absolutely as accessible as possible for low vision because there may be coworkers or employees or audience members who are trying to keep the extent of their low vision down low and are consequently missing important information. So a universal design and making something as accessible as possible to the greatest number of people. One way we can do this is providing a short visual description during our instruction. So descriptions can also benefit those who are sighted, who are just listening and not watching. Visual description provides a constructive way to disclose visual information that others can obtain, but we can't, and that we may want or need without us having to experience discomfort or ask directly or make a mistake. And we'll give you a couple of examples of this. So this guy goes by the Quad Father. He's pretty awesome. If you can watch some of his videos, they're great. but his appearance in this photo says something about his journey and his credibility if we are talking about a certain topic. And so for him to disclose, and that's up to him, but for him to disclose some of that will give us a better understanding of who he is. Sighted people see someone living the life, it may shape their engagement and their questions. And this is an advantage to listening to the presentation. We just want to make sure that we're kind and making sure we're including everyone. So we're going to listen to this disability rights lawyer talk about some of these visual descriptions and her experience with that.
A blind person thought I was white. All summer long, he pictured me as a pale-skinned, blonde, white Swedish girl. I asked him, how did you come up with this assumption? And earlier in the summer, I had mentioned that I have family in Sweden. And that's what sparked those images. This actually happens a lot in the blind community. Listening to my voice and assuming I look a certain way. So many visual descriptions also include race. This is intersectionality. This is providing blind individuals access to visual descriptions that are readily available to sighted individuals. It should be a choice. So no one should be forced to declare a race or gender if they don't want to. When you do this, though, if you feel safe and comfortable doing this, you provide access to information for blind individuals, which also helps to combat racism, sexism, and other forms of oppression in our community. You can share as much or as little as you want. Some people go into great detail about their clothing, their background. Others are very, very brief. Part of this is sharing your personality, sharing what's important to you, and it also is based on context. If you are in a fashion program, you're going to need to provide more details about your clothing and appearance. If it's a math conference, you might just provide the visual details like equations written on the board, or if you have cool earrings with a math theme that you want to share. Those are the kinds of things to keep in mind. So context matters. I'll do a brief visual description. I'm a Black woman sitting outside, long black hair, hazel eyes that dance. Behind me, my German Shepherd seeing-eye dog, Milo, is stretched out. This is intersectional. So we're fighting ableism, racism, and sexism. Don't leave room for the assumptions to set in, because those assumptions can be terribly harmful.
So keeping in mind, visual descriptions are great and inclusive, but they're not always universally applauded. Some people think they're unnecessary or take too much time. Shauna and I did a presentation recently that was an hour long. We invited visual descriptions, and that took half hour of a 1 hour presentation. So just keeping in mind, like, what are we requesting that people say? And when you're thinking about how to describe yourself, consider the topic and what information might be the most helpful or meaningful. For example, for many meetings, it's probably helpful to share your background if you're talking about something that affects your life versus the shirt that you're wearing. So for instance, I may want to say that we're doing a Zoom presentation on how to use Zoom. I'm Michelle Allen. I have a virtual background behind me that is a fake office with the MonTECH logo in the top corner. And that would be appropriate because we're talking about a virtual meeting. So, you know, all of the details about me isn't necessarily important for this context. So just keeping that in mind. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about your slide presentation. So we're doing a PowerPoint this time, and a lot of times PowerPoints are included when we do a virtual presentation. So we're just going to make sure our slideshow is accessible. And so these are just some general rules to abide by for people, no matter if they are low vision, have a learning disability, are hard of hearing, things that we just want to keep in mind. So we want to choose fonts and backgrounds and contrast carefully. And so there is ways to check your color contrast to make sure that it's appropriate. We'd be more than happy to help you with that. Make sure your font sizes are at least 24 point. You only have about 6 to 8 lines per slide. It's kind of all some people can handle. The alt text that we talked earlier, and then we'll talk about reading order next. So the physical order of your slides does not dictate the order that the screen reader is going to read it in. And if the screen reader is reading it in a different order, information may be missed. So here's a quick description of how you can change that reading order. It's in selection pane. And then you can also rename the slides and drag them in the order that you want them. So the next slide shows you a little bit about how that would work. So this is a slide we saw earlier, and we have our selection pane in. So here is just a more zoomed in view of what we're looking at here. And someone went in here and titled all of these slides so they could then put them in order. The odd thing about PowerPoint is it's reading from the bottom up. So we want to make sure that it's going to read down at the bottom first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So we want to make sure our order is from the bottom to the top. And that, you would want the title read first. So you would make sure the title was at the bottom. If you have videos in your slides, you're going to want to make sure your videos are accessible as possible. Do your best to ensure they're accessible. Maybe that means choosing videos that are captioned, or if you're sharing a screen to show a video directly from YouTube and make sure the captions are turned on. Maybe it means offering some verbal descriptions of what's happening in the video. The most accessible videos have both captioning and audio descriptions or narration. So our promo video, we have a link to it at the bottom of this slide. Our promo video is an example of including both of these accessibility options. It's right down here. So if you want to watch our video, it would be a great example of that. Right now, we're just going to show a video of what audio descriptions look like. I think that's the thing that maybe people know the least about, because it's not something all of the public needs. But when you need it, it is so beneficial. So we're going to watch this fun little video about what audio description is like.
From the creators of Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph, Disney. A carrot-nosed coal-eyed snowman shuffles up to a purple flower peeping out of deep snow.
Hello.
He takes a deep sniff. His nose lands on a frozen pond. A reindeer looks up and pants like a dog. Seeing the reindeer slip on the ice, the snowman smiles and moves towards him, though actually he's running on the spot. The reindeer falls on his chin. The snowman uses his arm as a crutch. The reindeer paddles his front legs. Head over heels, the snowman crawls on the ice. The reindeer does the breaststroke. The snowman rolls his body, but flips onto his back. The reindeer's tongue sticks to the ice. The snowman tilts his head. Twig arm and reindeer lips tug at the carrot. The carrot flies off and lands in soft snow. The reindeer goes after it with snowman and his body parts hanging on his tail. The snowman puts himself back together again and glumly contemplates his noseless state. The reindeer jams the carrot back in place and pants like a proud puppy. The snowman pats him with his stick for none, then goes to sneeze. He grabs his nose with both hands. His head shoots off. Frozen, coming this winter in 3D.
So a great example of how those audio descriptions can really give you an idea of what that video is. So the next thing we'll talk about is pronouns. Never assuming that you know someone's pronoun. You can't tell just by looking at someone what their pronoun is. You can see that on Maddie's screen, she has Maddie Kelly, she, her. That is definitely a choice that you can make if you want to put that on your screen. It's very easy to change your name on your platform that you're using. And so just something to consider as you are presenting, that this is important to people.
Now we're going to go over some do's and don'ts of planning considerations for your next online meeting. So it's important to be thoughtful in your planning, not just for the attendee who may have a physical disability, but also for those with learning disabilities. So it's important to consider your audience and language level. This includes your pace of your presentation, your volume, how clearly you're speaking. Try to keep your meeting on a shorter time span. As soon as the meetings start to get longer, people start to lose interest and it becomes more difficult. Try to schedule or plan breaks ahead of time. Decide whether the camera should be on or off when entering the meeting, and same thing with the microphone being on or off upon entering. So your decisions are likely to be based in part on whether you have attendees with disabilities that physically hinder their ability to manage these settings themselves. So on Zoom, there is a cool feature that you can use Zoom Schedule a Meeting to ask about accommodations ahead of time. So when you click the Edit Registration button, you as the presenter can add custom questions where your attendees can then answer in short responses. Having the chance to ask these questions ahead of time then allows the presenter to get familiar with their attendees and any accommodations that need to be addressed ahead of time. As you can see in the photo, there are boxes under the required area. So these are questions that you can preload, and then depending on what your presentation is about, you can go in and require these questions to be answered before the attendee can enter the meeting. Talked about backgrounds. The big question is what's appropriate. So a branded background is a way to kind of bypass that discussion. As you can see in Michelle and I's videos, we have our branded MonTECH backgrounds. Zoom profile backgrounds in general are often a nice thing to have in a meeting to limit any background activity or distractions. It also helps maintain professionalism. Above, you can see that here are like a few MonTECH backgrounds that we've used in the past. They're just an easy way to carry a program name throughout a presentation, and it allows attendees to become more familiar with the program name and or the logo. So when starting an online meeting, here is just some basic information for participants or meeting attendees. So make sure to introduce the presenters and the ASL interpreter if they are present. Mention accessibility features that are available. There's different accessibility features on different platforms, so just reminding attendees of those. Remind how to access any handouts or materials, especially if they were handed out in advance, where they can find those. Request attendees stay muted when not speaking if they are able to mute and unmute themselves. This can just limit background noise and anyone talking over one another. And let participants know how you'll be answering the question. So kind of those ground rules, how we're going to address questions, comments, and specifically the chat box, either by unmuting or reading it aloud. Teams versus Zoom, the two main online meeting platforms. So when spotlighting a video on Zoom versus Teams, there are a couple differences. So on Zoom, you can spotlight up to 9 people on your screen. That means if there are more than 9 participants in a meeting, only 9 will be visible on your screen. And these 9 people will show up in your recorded version. Let's say there's less than 9 people, then all of those participants will show. On Teams, it will only spotlight one person at a time. So one main individual will be the view on your screen. However, this one spotlighted person will not show up in the recorded version. It will show all attendees, although this may change in future updates to Teams, so stay tuned. And then when pinning a video in Zoom and Teams, they're a little similar, but we're gonna kind of break them down. So in Zoom, pinning can be done either by the host for all of the attendees or by an individual where it only affects their view and their screen. This allows you to disable the active speaker view, meaning whoever is speaking will take precedence on your screen, and will allow you to change to the view designated speaker. So then that is the person that you will pin on your screen. You can also pin multiple participants on your screen at a time. In Teams, it is nice, no one will know you pinned them. It allows you to do the same thing to disable the active speaker view and go to your designated speaker view. And you can also pin multiple participants, but it will only allow up to 4 at once. Teams and Zoom have a few similar features. So both platforms have keyboard shortcuts. If you have any questions on how to access or what those keyboard shortcuts are, feel free to contact us and we can help break that down for you. Zoom and Teams both support screen readers, which is huge. And the magnifying the screen is possible on both Teams and Zoom. In Teams, this is the feature called Zoom in and out. And in Zoom, this is called the magnifier feature. Captioning, both Teams and Zoom offer it. It shows 2 lines of closed captioning on the screen at a time. In Zoom, you can save the closed captions or the transcript of the meeting. In Teams, though, you can only save the captions and transcript for 30 minutes. So keep that in mind when you determine which platform you're going to be using. And closed captioning may not work if you're using a Chromebook to access your online meeting.
This is Michelle again, and I'm going to talk about closed captioning in general. So who uses captions and what's the expectation? There are 3 laws addressing captioning or transcription: the American for Disabilities Act, the Rehab Act, and the IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. People using captions are also people who are in loud environments that interfere with their hearing. People in environments where they can't turn up the volume, like in planes or during their commutes. People who are bothered by ambient noise in videos, and captions give people with attention deficit another way to help stay focused. I will say that captioning is something that we use in our own home with our TV. It just helps us if we miss something, if somebody is, wants to catch some words they didn't know and learning new vocabulary. And so there's a lot of reasons to use captioning, but remembering that captioning is the accessible way to do Zoom meetings. So 80% of those using captions do not have hearing impairments. I think that that's really important to remember as we are deciding to put captioning on our information. So why is captioning important? So thinking about when we're choosing what captioning program we want to use, we want to make sure we're choosing the one that is most accurate as possible. And we'll go into some options of what those might be, but thinking about this is what 75% of if you were to caption 75% of the words, this is what it would look like right here. So you're missing a lot. You're missing full words. At 85%, it's getting a little better, but you're still having to piece together some things if you miss them. So our goal is obviously read my words at 100%. We're getting all of the information and nothing is missed. So one good option would be to auto-generated. This is a good option because it's quick and easy. YouTube, for example, if we do an unboxing video or a video featuring a piece of equipment, we utilize the auto captioning, but that captioning is going to be inaccurate. And the information is important, and we can be accessed by YouTubers forever. So it's not just a one and done. We have to go in and we have to edit those captions so they're as accurate as possible for long term. So after YouTube auto generates those captions, we go in and we listen to the video and we make those edits to make sure it's accurate. Make sure you're monitoring that you're watching to see for accuracy. And then remembering the auto generated is only like 60 to 90% correct, which is why we go in and check and make sure that it's the way we want it before we present it out to the world. So here's a great example of how automatic captioning can go totally wrong. So the spoken audio is broil on high for 45 minutes. You should not preheat the oven. The automatic caption is broil on high for 4 to 5 minutes. You should know to preheat the oven. So this could really make your dish go wrong. And so we need to think about, like, that could really be bad if they're cooking something for 45 minutes that needs to be cooked for 4 minutes. So really, just a really good example of why this captioning accuracy is so important. So a better option than bad audio generated captioning you can edit might be a service like Typewell. This service can provide a transcriber who uses abbreviation software to capture the essence of a discussion, which can be read by the user in real time. So you can see on here, that's going to be something that's going to cost you a little bit, but it's less work for you on the back end. And it's not word for word. It just conveys the meaning. So some people say the best option is CART. CART can be accessed through the Montana Telecommunications Access Program, which is also called MTAP. CART captioners might use a phonetic keyboard or methods used in stenography. If you decide to use a sign language interpreter, DPHHS has a list of qualified sign language interpreters. And remember, tech is changing all the time. Today's good options might be even better, or they might have been outrun by a new option. So really keeping in mind and staying up to date on what is the best captioning option. So if you are doing a video or you're doing a Zoom call for Montana residents, the MTAP program will provide that for free. If it's for a national audience, you can still go to this ailive.com and pay a small fee to have that auto captioned. And just remember, we're making this information as accessible as accessible as possible to the most people. So thinking about hybrid meetings, I get calls for this all the time where, you know, it's either our video's not working or not everybody can, the people in the room are speaking loudly, but the people over Zoom can't hear them. And so we just want to make sure that our remote attendees for our conferences are getting all of the information. And we have a great example of this from recently. We went to the National AT Conference, ATIA, and there was a woman presenting at the front of the room, and she constructed this whole switch setup at the table at the front of the room. It not only was it difficult for the people in attendance to see what she had set up, but it was impossible for the remote attendees. They didn't have a camera set up to show the table at the front of the room. So the remote attendees were just basically sitting there for the 15 minutes that she was presenting that, because we were missing that information. So making sure that you have everything that you need. And then some other key points we talked about earlier is say your name before you're speaking, share aloud the items in the chat. Not everybody can read the chat or have their screen reader read it for them. Some people just can't keep up with both of them. So keeping that in mind. Anybody that speaks up that is soft spoken, make sure you're repeating their question so nobody misses it. And then ask the input of the virtual attendees frequently, making sure you are meeting everybody's needs. If you have an in-person room, try to avoid side conversations. That makes the noise level much harder for everyone virtually to hear. And then maintain eye contact with all the attendees. Make sure you're looking around the room, but you're also looking at the Zoom camera so that everybody feels included. MonTECH is working on a hybrid meeting kit. This would include some of the things in this list. This picture is of the owl. It's really cool. He is seems animated, but he turns every time he hears a voice, he turns towards that voice. So not only the camera is picking up the person that is talking, but the sound is directed towards that person. So the owl is a 360-degree camera. It has an 18-foot radius for audio pickup, smart mics to equalize speaking volume. So it's a really great way to have more engagement in your room, and then thinking about like the sound and your laptops and things like that. So this ends our presentation. We want to thank you all for attending. We have some great information up here right now. So I am Michelle, and I am in the Missoula office. So if you're needing help on my side of the state, I'd be the one to help you answer questions or find equipment or whatever your needs might be, or the people you're working with might be. And then Marlena is in Billings, and so she serves that side of the state. She's part-time, so you have to make an appointment to meet with her, and we can help you get in touch with her if that's something that you need. I would also encourage you to check out our website. The link is down here at the bottom, and we have a ton of equipment on there that can be checked out, including some of these webcams, document cameras that can be used during a Zoom meeting, and speakers and things like that. So definitely reach out if you have any questions, and thank you for attending our meeting.